Okay, so the first weather website that I really want to point out is windfinder.com. So if I type in that in the description bar up top, basically you get to the Windfinder website, which, as you can see, displays a map of the entire United States with the current wind, and you can see that it's color coded. You got the particles. It really gives you a good idea of how the wind is moving at this particular point in time. That's only kind of minimally helpful. It tells you obviously what the wind is doing at one time, but of course I'm not going to have a laptop out in the woods with me. So what I like to use Windfinder for personally is if I zoom in, you can see some of these red dots. These red dots represent wind stations that are associated with the website. So you can get wind statistics over time by looking at any one of these red dots. So if I zoom into, say, the Rochester wind station, I click on that dot and I can either look at the forecast or measurements. I want to click on measurements. Once I click on measurements, you get to this screen that has some more information, but what I'm really interested in is to look at this top bar here and click on wind statistics. Now that gives me a historical breakdown of kind of how the wind moves throughout this area. So you can see in this first table here, it'll tell you the dominant wind direction by month, and it'll tell you what percentage of the time the wind is actually that dominant wind. So in January, for example, the dominant wind is kind of a west-northwest, or more precisely 292 degrees, and there's about a 34% chance that the wind is going to be from that direction, and the other 66% of the time it's going to be doing something else. And then you can also see the average wind speed and air temperature for those given months. But if we drop down a little bit lower, you can see a radar chart or a radar graph that gives you a little bit better breakdown of what all the winds are doing at any given time. So it defaults to the overall year, but you can go month by month. So I can click on November, for example, and you can see all these different months give you a little bit different look of what that chart looks like. And what this basically is telling you is that for any one of these wind directions, you'll have a certain percentage of the time that the wind is that direction. So east-southeast in November, there's a 9.9% chance the wind is coming from the east-southeast. There's a 15.4% chance it's coming from southeast. And once you get used to looking at what these radar charts are supposed to tell you, it becomes blatantly obvious here that the wind is either going to be coming from the west-northwest, give or take a few degrees, or the southeast, give or take a few degrees. In fact, I went through here earlier and just kind of added up all these percentages. The amount of time that the wind is kind of in this range between east-southeast and south-southeast, and the amount of time that it's between northwest and west, it's like 75% of the time. Right, so 25% of the time it's going to be doing something else, but 3/4 of the time it's one of those two directions. So then how can you kind of use this information as a hunter? Well, let's say you have some private land and you want to put up some presets. It wouldn't really make sense for you to set up stands based on getting a north wind, because in the month of November in this location, there is less than a 1% chance that the wind will actually be coming from dead north. Likewise, 1.1% north-northeast, 1.1% northeast. So you're going to want to set up your preset stands to take advantage of these southeast winds or these west-northwest winds. Now, the other way you can kind of use this information to your advantage is if you're going to do some scouting and you want to find some wind-specific bedding areas. You might be able to find some, say, south wind bedding directions, because 7% of the time their wind is coming from the south, but if you want to kind of see the areas with the heaviest sign, the most worn down bedding, it makes sense to look for those areas that are set up to take advantage of, for the deer's perspective, to take advantage of a southeast wind or a west-northwest wind. That's likely where you're going to find most of your sign. The next weather website I want to point out is Weather Underground. The URL for this website is wunderground.com, and I've just plugged in the location again of Rochester, Minnesota. And you can see, like most weather websites, they have kind of your daily, hourly, 10-day forecast, all that good stuff. But I really like the 10-day forecast and the way it's laid out on this website. Because I'm a very visual person, I'd much rather look at graphs and tables rather than just a bunch of numbers. So the way that they have their 10-day forecast laid out is very visually intuitive. You have your typical 10-day forecast look on the very top row here with the pictures of, sun and clouds and all that stuff, your high and low temperature. But then below that, they have the temperature, the barometric pressure, the chance of rain, and the wind speed and direction, all just laid out there graphically. So in a matter of seconds, I can instantly get a feel for what is going to happen over the next few days. it's much easier and quicker for me to see that all of a sudden Wednesday we're going to have a lower temperature day rather than actually looking through these numbers and seeing, oh yeah, Wednesday is going to be a little bit cooler. So again, just for the way that this is laid out, I really like the Weather Underground website. Weather Underground also offers a history. If you go to wunderground.com/history, you can find it. It's a little bit different than kind of the statistical averages that we saw on the Windfinder site, which I personally find very helpful for planning hunts. This one gives you a good history for what actually happened on specific days. So if I'll just plug in Rochester, Minnesota again for consistency. Let's try September 22nd, 2017. Submit. And now, like I said, this is the actual, recorded temperature that was on that day. You can look at the dew point, humidities, basically all the pertinent weather statistics that you would want to find. You can see that the wind direction was 11 miles an hour south-southeast that day with a max gust of 33 miles an hour. But if you go down here to the bottom, you can see graphically what happened that day. You can see what the temperature was at specific hours of the day. Same thing with the barometric pressure, wind speed, the gusts, and the wind direction. So you can see that throughout that particular day it was pretty steadily southeast. Now, what you can also do here is you can change the tab here to weekly, monthly, or set a custom range. So if I set it to monthly here, now I'm looking at all of September for that year of 2017. And now we get kind of a conglomerate of all the weather days for that particular year, that particular month. The wind statistics gets its data from multiple years, so it gives you a little bit better average because there's more data points getting plugged into it. Whereas if we just look at 2017 here, we might find slightly different results than, say, 2016, 2015, etc. But this can still be helpful. So if we scroll down here, and we again have the historical graph here. And this graph is pretty similar to what you remember seeing from the forecast, the 10-day forecast tab. But what we have is actual recorded data. So you can see that on the wind direction side of things, we have these clusters of points. And this might not be quite as intuitive or quite as easy to read as that radar chart. But if you kind of draw your own sort of best fit lines through all these clusters of data points, you can see that there's an awful lot of data points that fall right between south and southeast. And you can see that there's also quite a few data points that kind of land on that west-northwest direction. So from that, we can kind of gather that this is agreeing with the same chart that we saw on wind statistics, where we're very likely to have either a southeast wind or kind of a west-northwest wind. This is just kind of confirmation, but what I would personally use this more for is for looking at past data on specific days. Say you're trying to match up a trail camera picture and figure out what it actually was, build a plan, build a strategy. Whereas if I'm looking to build a plan on the front end, not knowing any kind of history about the area I'm going to look at that wind statistics chart first. Most of the wind and weather data that I'm looking at is on my phone, so I'll just kind of run over some of the apps that I use most often and kind of how they work. The Windy app is one of those apps that I paid like $5 or $10 for back when it was first on Kickstarter. And you can see on this homepage, you can find some of your favorite spots, save them, and also you can go down to the wind map. And you can see that the wind map shows us a very similar map to what we saw on kind of that homepage of the Windfinder website, where you have color coding, where the darker colors are the stronger wind. You can see the little particles that are kind of animating the wind direction. But since this is on your phone, I find it to be a little bit more helpful than when you're actually sitting at home on a computer. I'll just zoom into the Rochester area here. Tap just to get the screen to pop up on the top here. You can see it's a west wind right now, 8.1 miles an hour. And to get more information, I'll just click on that 8.1. And now we have a whole lot of more information. But basically, what is this telling us? Well, you can have a couple different profiles here. You can see a light profile, full. They have a bunch of these pre-saved ones, but then you can also set your own custom profiles to be able to look at this stuff. I'll just go to the full one quick. And you can either plug in 3 hour or 1 hour. So the 1 hour obviously just gives you a little bit more detail, but they both are telling you the same information. So I'll stick it to 1 hour quick. And if I slide down here, what we have on this top bar is we can scroll basically to see our extended forecast. And it's all color coded. So right now, if I'm looking at today's forecast, which you can see right here, it says today, and we have at 7 a.m. roughly it gets light, west wind, 8 miles an hour-ish, gusting 13 to 17, 54 degrees right now, warming up to 72, and you got the barometric pressure there. You have your humidity, relative humidity, cloud cover, precipitation in millimeters per hour, and you can go into the settings and change all the units for these. But since this is color coded, I can look and say, oh, it looks like, Thursday into Friday, it's going to be pretty windy. So I can just kind of scroll over to that time frame, and you can see that, Friday overnight, 14, 15 mile an hour wind gusting to the low 30s. And of course, you have the wind directions throughout that entire time posted on that top bar. So this is kind of the weather app or the wind app that I'll use when I'm out in the field to get my most up-to-date wind directions. And of course, the wind direction itself is only going to tell you so much. Obviously, once you're out in the field, things like terrain features, field edges, that kind of thing, thermals, that all can kind of change the actual wind that you're seeing. But in terms of learning what that prevailing wind direction is, this is what I prefer to use. The other thing you can do within this app is look at the history. So if I go from the forecast tab to the history tab up top here, now I can see sort of a history that would be similar to what we had on that W Underground history, where it's telling you what actually happened in various days in the past. So if I, say in 2017 on, we'll say October 8th, I had a big deer on trail camera. I want to figure out what the weather was doing on that particular day. I can click on that day, scroll down, and I can see that the wind direction started off as, kind of southwest, quickly moved to south, and then it basically did a 180 from about 1 o'clock to 10 o'clock at night. So if we go to Scout Look, we basically come to a home page that has a map, and you can choose and select and save locations. And if I click on this Rochester point, you can see the current information, which right now it's a west-northwest wind, and you can have the barometric pressure, major and minor times for today, mosquito alert, sunrise, sunset time. So a lot of your basic information you'd want to know. The major and minor times are based off of the lunar positions, and basically the major times are based on when the moon is overhead or underfoot. Some people believe increases deer activity. There's some anecdotal evidence and some research that kind of goes either way, so it's kind of personal opinion, I think, whether or not you choose to believe in it or not. But typically the people that really follow the moon times will try to line up when those major times would correspond with when a deer would want to normally move anyway. And we can see we have these kind of abbreviated day-by-day forecasts where you can see the high-low temperature, and you can click on an hourly to kind of expand any one of those days. And now you can see the barometric pressure, you can see the temperature hour by hour, what the wind direction is, and the wind speed. And then what you can also do on Scout Look, show property lines. That's a paid feature that they've added recently. And you can add cloud cover or radar. With that cloud cover turned on, now I can see what that cloud cover actually looks like at this point in time. Same thing with the radar. And with that radar, I'll just zoom into one of these storm cells here. And I'll hit play. And I've used various radar apps over the years, and some of them are really glitchy, take a long time to load. I haven't really had too many issues with the Scout Look one. So usually if I want to figure out, what the radar is doing, I typically will go to the Scout Look app. So if you've purchased the property lines in this app and you have it turned on, you have that little check mark selected, you can kind of scroll around and get landowner information for any of these parcels. Typically I'll like to use, either Onyx Hunt or County GIS websites to get this information also. But it is something that Scout Look has available, and I don't think too many people know about it, so I wanted to make sure I included it in the video. You can also click on the little tool icon to bring up a measurement tool, mark up the map, or even use it to track your location and make a breadcrumb trail. So if I pull up that Weather Underground app, I have the current conditions here, and if I scroll down, I can see the forecast as well. And similar to how they have the forecast laid out on their website, a lot of it is graphical, which I'm a huge fan of. So if I try and scroll to the left here, you can see a legend of what everything is being displayed. And then as I scroll right, I can see that extended 10-day forecast. And since it's all here graphically, I can see that without even reading any of the numbers, I can see Friday, huge chance of rain. I can watch how that temperature graph changes. I can immediately see any cold fronts that are moving through. So I personally like that graphical display much more than just reading the numbers. And you can click on an hour by hour tab to get a little bit better resolution or detail in terms of what the wind and the temperature is doing hour by hour. And if you click on the summary tab, you have your very typical just kind of one sentence description of what the weather's going to be like on each individual day. Not quite as much information here as what they had on their website, but I do like the way that it's displayed, and for that reason I use the Weather Underground app quite a bit. So that's pretty much a summary of the apps that I use. If you guys have any additional apps or websites that you really like, make sure to drop them down in the comments down below and I'll go check them out. And if you found this video to be helpful, please let me know by liking, subscribe to the channel if you aren't already, and thanks for watching.